everyone, it's Kerry back with you today. What I've got here in front of me are some of the pages from Reenie's latest vintage papers pack. Now this isn't all of the pages because I've already used some, but I just wanted to show you how absolutely stunning they are. And there's essentially 3 different page designs, but then they come in the huge variety of colours. So there's literally something here for every project. This one here, I love this bright burst of colour down here. And then this one over here, which I've probably been using the most of. And again, it has all the different colourways, which I just love. So I have used some papers from these packs today to create today's project. And I've been a little bit obsessed, but I've been making these paper frames. Now I was of course inspired by the new ideology frames from Tim Holtz, and I've been creating these using Reenie's papers, and I just love the variation in them. But I don't like cutting frames out in the traditional sense of, marking a border and then marking an inner square and then cutting this inner square out. I find that difficult. So I'm going to show you today a different method for making frames, and you won't end up with all of these little inside squares, so it's a little bit less wasteful for me, because I always struggle afterwards with what am I going to do with all these squares that I've got left over. You can use the frames for lots of different things. I've popped a little frame on top of this CD envelope, and then I've just popped a little journaling card on the inside. So I've got like a little window pocket here. This one I've just used in a traditional sort of frame manner. I've got a picture underneath with a frame around the outside. Now I haven't backed it onto anything yet because I'm not sure how I'm going to use it, but I could just use it as a picture in a frame, or I could turn it into a pocket or a side tuck, all sorts of different things. Again, this is just another little window envelope that I've made. So we've just got the clear window there with the frame here. And this one I've actually turned into a double window pocket. So it's got a frame on both sides with a little window in it. And I'll just take these images out. So you can actually see through both sides of the pocket, and I've just strategically placed labels on each side so that you don't see the back of the label from each side of the frame. So I'll show you how I've created these today. So because this page has non-directional imagery on it, in other words, some book pages run this way, some are running this way, it doesn't matter how I cut it. If you're using a book page or something that is orientated in a specific direction, you'll need to make sure that you cut according to your image's orientation if you want to have a cohesive looking frame that has everything in the right direction. So of course you don't need to use these pages. You can use book page, you can use scrapbook paper, you can use blank paper, whatever you like. So today I'm going to work in centimetres, and I'm going to use this mat that has this alignment grid to help me cut my strips evenly. So I'm just going to line my piece of paper up onto one of the lines here. Now if you have washi tape or something like that, you could add a little bit of washi tape just to help keep the remainder of the paper still while we start cutting the lines. And then because this let me just line that up from this side. And I think I want to have 2 centimetre wide edges on my frames today. So basically I'm just going to take my ruler and knife, and I'm going to cut 2 centimetre wide strips off my piece of paper. So I've just got these strips here. Now I'm actually going to turn my paper around this way just so I get a little bit more variation in my strips. I don't want everything to look the same. Alright, so I've bought my scoreboard in and I've got my strips here. Now these might look a little bit different because I had a couple of technical issues, so I've had to cut a couple more strips. So just touching back on the strips, if you don't want to cut them down with a ruler and a craft knife, what you could do instead is, I'm just going to bring in a piece, this is a piece that I've cut, that I've already started cutting down, is you could always utilize your scoreboard and just score your paper at the same width, so 2 centimeter marks. Then you could come in and strengthen those creases, and I'd probably go a step further and burnish those down a bit. And then with the help of your ruler, you could come in and tear the strips rather than cut them. So that way you've still got strips, but they're a little bit more rustic and not quite so perfect and even. And then when you build your frames out of these, it won't matter if your frame is not 100% straight, because you won't be able to tell because you've got the torn edges. Anyway, that's just another option. So I'm going to bring my scoreboard back in, and I want to utilize these edges of my scoreboards to help me make sure my frames are nice and square. So I know I don't want my frames to be anywhere near that length, so I'm just going to roughly cut them in half. And then the first thing I do is bring in one piece of my frame and I butt it up against the edge of my scoreboard. So then I'll select another piece of paper for the frame. Let's just use this one. Actually, I'm going to use this one. And I know that because my strips are 2 centimeters, I can pop my glue on here as long as I don't come down past about 2 centimeters. It's not going to show. So I just pop a little bit of glue, and then holding this piece flush up against this edge, I use the other edge, push up my piece flush up against that side, so that I know that these two pieces are square in this corner, like that. Now, because of the nature of this paper, with it being sort of collagey, the fact that this line is here, it doesn't really matter. It actually sort of adds to the look of it. So from here I can have a look at sort of what sort of width I'm looking for the frame. So this is the way the frame is going to be orientated. So this will be the top. How wide along here do I want this frame? And I can use the lines on the scoreboard to help me make sure this is straight. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue here, because I'm going to use this line to help me get a straight edge. Pick up my strip, butt it up against the top, and then just making sure that it's straight along this line on my scoreboard. And then I can pick up my frame, trim off this edge, turn it round, and then again I can just take another piece, and again I'm going to utilise the lines on my scoreboard. So a little bit of glue here, a little bit of glue here. Make sure my frame is flush up against the edge. Now, it wasn't quite straight there, so I've just pulled that off. Pop a little bit more glue back on there. And because I hadn't cut this edge flush, I'm just going to pull that away a little bit from this edge. And then just trim away my excess. And then I have a little square frame. And when I say square, I mean the corners are all square. Now, I had gone along and prepared some strips earlier, and I've cut my strips down so that I have 2 sizes. They're all the same width, but I have some that are a little bit shorter than others. So that means that when I'm building my frames, it's like a really super quick process. I just take one of my long lengths, add a bit of glue, pick up one of my short lengths, make sure they're aligned, swing my frame, pop a little bit of glue, make sure my edges are square in the corners. And then I know, because these are the same length, I know that I just need to line up the edges of my papers for this last piece. So take another section, line that up there, and it should pretty much fall in the right spot. That's it. Another frame there. And then if you want to add a little bit of interest, you can take some shorter or different size pieces from some of the offcuts and just add those around the frame just for a little bit of variation. There we go, and then that just gives it a little bit more of a different look. So the other thing that you can do making frames this way is make them to fit certain images. So for example, if I wanted to make a frame for this picture, I could just bring in one of my longer pieces here, and then I'll tuck my image underneath, and then grab this piece here. Now I might tuck that under. Pop a little bit of glue. Making sure I'm holding my edges flush up against the edge. Then I can take another longer piece and I can use the lines on my scoreboard to help me keep it level. So I might just trim the top of this off because I don't want it to be the same on both sides. So that wasn't very straight. So might have that one about there. A little bit of glue. Using the straight lines on my scoreboard to help me get it straight. And then I need another piece for across the bottom. So now I know that this frame is going to fit this picture, and I just need to cut off my extras. There we go, so that one's going to fit that picture perfectly. And I could go ahead and put a piece of acetate underneath if I wanted to make it a clear pocket, that sort of thing. So for me, I found cutting the paper into strips and making the frames using this method was more efficient for me, both in terms of time needed to make the frame, so I didn't have to measure around and then cut out the middle. Of course, if you had a rectangle or a couple of different rectangle dies, you could just run them through your die cutting machine and that will cut them out for you. But I also don't have the square inner piece, which I then would have to try and think of another project to utilise. I've just been able to go ahead and make lots of frames out of the same page, and they go together really quick. I made all of these in one evening, and then I stitched them all in another session. So there we go. I hope you like the frames and a couple of ideas on how you might use them. I will leave links in the description box below to Renee's Vintage Papers pack. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to use these papers. You can use whatever papers you like. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you again next time. Bye.